Do you want the Golda Meir story?
Yes.
I'll tell you how my friendship with Golda was born. I'm a Goy, not a Jew. I was in Israel when Levi Eshkol died. And for a couple of days, the Labour Party's men met to decide who would be the leader next Prime Minister. They couldn't decide which man would lead them. So Golda Meir was drafted. She was Secretary General of the party, former Foreign Minister. She was drafted in as a compromise candidate. Now there were about 700 foreign correspondents in the country at the time, and they all said, "Oh, it's a foregone conclusion. Golda's going to win this. We don't need to sit through hours and babble in Hebrew. We'll just wait for the verdict and we'll publish a picture saying she's Prime Minister." And I said to my television crew, "There's a bloody good story here if we get it right." So we file in, and they have a long debate lasting about 5 hours in Hebrew, choosing between various candidates. And Golda was sitting in the middle of the audience, and I said to my crew, "When the result is announced, and if it's Golda, I don't want the camera focused on the stage. I want it tight, head and shoulders close up on Golda Meir." So they announce it's Golda. And my camera witnessed what I saw with my own eyes. When her name was announced, she went, and her shoulders sagged. Now, we reporters always talk about the weight of the office, the burden of responsibility falling on their shoulders. That was it. I mean, she was as old as my grandmother, as fragile as my grandmother, or so I thought, and yet here was this old lady about to become Prime Minister of the most arrogant and arguably most powerful young nation on earth. However, when I got back to the hotel, which was actually only just across the road, I wrote and filed my story, and then I said to the concierge, "I want 3 dozen roses for Golda." And I had them sent with my calling card, and I just told her how moved this guy had been by watching this weight descending. And I thought that was that. She'd never get the flowers. And hours later, I was in the bar, and the telephone rang, and a voice said, "Thank you for the flowers and the thoughts that came with them." And that was the beginning of a relationship. And every time I went to Israel thereafter, I sent her 3 dozen roses. And at one point she said to me, "Alan, I've had a bit of trouble because initially my security men were tearing all the petals off." She said, I told them not to do that. But there's 2 more roses stories which I might as well tell you. There was one time when I was meeting with Golda in the Prime Minister's office, and the whole of the cabinet outside was waiting to meet her. And the conversation went on and on, and she overran the due time for the cabinet meeting by 25 minutes. And when I left her inner office and went to the outer office, I could see all these male chauvinist pigs, her ministers, and they were clearly very pissed off, to use an English phrase, and they were muttering and muttering. And Golda's confidant all her life was a wonderful French Jew, Est, called Lou Kadar. And Lou said to me, "Alan, they're talking about you. Do you want to know what they're saying?" So I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, they're basically saying, what does our Prime Minister see in this bloody goy?" And then she rattled off a few sentences in Hebrew. And then she said, "Do you want to know what I said to them?" I said, "Yes, please." And they're all standing listening. And she said, "Gentlemen, the difference between you lot and him is that he's the only one who treats her as a woman." You have never seen such embarrassment on so many faces. And the last Rose's story, I didn't get to Israel for Yom Kippur until the 2nd day of the war. And I felt a bit foolish given how serious things were. I still went through the motions of sending the 3 dozen roses. And I knew she was not in the Prime Minister's office, that she was in her little home in Tel Aviv having an emergency kitchen cabinet. But I still sent the roses. And Lou Kadar, her associate, called me about an hour later and said, Alan, Golda thanks you for the roses as ever, but she probably won't get to call you herself tonight. But at about midnight, Golda did call. And she said, Alan, I'm afraid this is the one occasion when I can't give you the first interview. And she told me why. She said, I've got to get on a plane and go and have a crisis showdown with Nixon, because Kissinger is sitting at his elbow saying, don't give them the weapons they want now, make them sweat. So she said, I've got to give the first interview to an American network to begin putting the pressure on Nixon. And I said to her, Mrs. Meir, it really is no battle. My roses against American weapons. I said, okay, game over.